we're starting a new series tonight, and I'm not really sure how long we're going to go with this. We're going to ride it out. I know for sure it'll be this week and next week, but I want to start a new series tonight called This Is How I Fight. And I want to share with you for a second what the goal is behind this, and it's going to be a little bit different for the first half of tonight. I want to try to teach for a second and try to maybe enlighten you on some things that maybe you don't know. Maybe it's questions that you've had and you haven't wanted to ask, or maybe you didn't even know that you needed to ask because you didn't know that you didn't know. I don't know if that even made sense, but we are getting ready to do our annual week of prayer and fasting as a church, the whole harbor, and we do this every year towards the beginning of the year, and it's a time that we have as a church, as a community of individuals to get together and to fast and pray for breakthrough in our lives and in our church and in our community, and just really seek God in some different areas. And it's an amazing thing to do for you personally. It's an amazing thing to do as a family, as a church body. And, I realize as we're getting ready to do this and as we've been promoting this, that there's probably a decent amount of people that maybe you've gotten saved in the last year. Maybe this whole walk with God is brand new to you. Maybe you haven't even made that decision yet, and that's okay. Maybe you're just coming and hanging out for the good music and getting to know people. That's awesome. We're glad you're here. But if you are here and you're like, I don't get what that is, and to be honest, it sounds a little cultish, I get it, okay? And I'll probably think the same thing if I didn't grow up around it. And so what I want to do tonight specifically is I want to talk to you just for a few minutes, and I want to do a little teaching on what fasting is so that you have a good understanding and you can start to prayerfully consider joining our church in doing this next week, because I believe that it is a powerful thing in the life of the believer. Now, this series as a whole, I really want it to be an equipping series that as a Jesus follower, somebody who has a relationship with the Lord, that when adversity comes, when challenges come, when a diagnosis comes, when tragedy hits, when things catch you off guard, when life is just happening, that you understand that there are things at your disposal as a son and a daughter of God, as someone who has a relationship with Jesus, recognizing that the same power that raised Jesus back to life lives inside of me, that there are things that I can do. This is how I fight. When things happen, I don't just have to be a slave to the things that come at me in life. I can actually be proactive, and I can actually do things, and this is how I do battle as a Jesus follower. And so my prayer is that, you can catch a fish for a guy and feed him for a meal, or you can teach him to fish for a lifetime. And I hope that through this series that you leave this and you get through this and you say, man, I recognize that from now on for my life or for my relationship or for my marriage or for my family, that there are times where I will do battle. There are times where I will fight for breakthrough. I will fight for God to move in my situation and in my family. And so I'm believing that this is going to be a setup for a lifelong journey of you saying, man, I love God. I know that God loves me, and I'm willing to go to war. I'm willing to go to battle for some things. So I believe that it's going to be good. So can you bear with me for a few minutes as we get some details out there about what fasting is, and I'll preach a little bit at the end. Does that sound good? Cool. So I'm going to throw a bunch of information up on the screen. If you want to take notes, feel free, but I want to hit you with some details really quick. So practically speaking, what is fasting? Like what is this? And I'm going to talk in a few minutes about what fasting is not, which is probably going to answer some pressing questions. But why do we fast? So as I'm trying to think of a practical definition, the best way to explain this, I would say this, that fasting is a way of saying with your body how much you need, want, and what else did I say? Trust God. See, it's really important. I can remember it. It's a way to say with your body how much you need, want, and how much you trust God. It's a way of showing this desperation to say, I'm not even just going to say it, and I'm not even just going to pray it, and I'm not even just going to believe it, but I'm literally going to show God, God, I need you. God, I want you. God, I need breakthrough. God, I need protection. God, I need provision. God, I need something. Or God, I just trust you. I need to be closer to you. I desire intimacy with you. It's a way that you can do that with your body. Another definition would be it's turning your attention from your physical needs to your spiritual need. So it's recognizing there's nothing bad about food. Is good, okay? Food is good. I love food. But it's taking a season to say, you know what? I can turn from what is good because I'm pursuing what is great, and I'm pursuing what is God. And God, I'm willing to give up good for a temporary season to pursue you and to show you how desperate I am for a move of you or a touch from you in my life. This is a powerful thing that is at your disposal. This is not something that should weigh on you and something that should cause you fear and trembling. Some of you, when you talk about giving up meals, you're like, nope, that's where I draw the line. This Jesus thing was good, but if I'm going to have to give up food, I don't know. Listen, this is a tool for you. This is something that works for your benefit. This is something that you can use to show God how serious and how desperate you are. So real quick, I want to say what fasting is not really quick. I want to give you a few guidelines of what fasting is not. Fasting is not required, number one. Okay, I want to make this clear. So there are certain things in the Bible that we are commanded to do. We are given clear instruction to do. Fasting is not one of them. Okay, so it's not like you're going to get to heaven one day and God is going to be like, you never fasted? I never knew you. That's not going to happen. Okay, it is not on the same level as confessing your sin and asking Jesus into your heart. It's not on the same level as getting water baptized. Fasting is not a requirement in the Bible. Fasting also is not a crash diet. Okay, I want to pop some bubbles right now. Listen, you can judge me if you want, but it is so easy to get in the mindset where you're like, oh, sweet, this worked out. It's the beginning of the year. It's spring. Summer's coming around. I need to lose 20 pounds. And I'm going to just give you a window into what is going to happen right now, okay? So this happens for me every time. In 5 days of fasting, typically I can lose like between 10 and 12 pounds in 5 days. By like the day and a half mark, I've gained back 13. So I'm telling you right now, this is not about you losing weight, okay? And you're going to feel stoked. You're going to be like, oh, I feel great. Fasting is the why have I not been doing this? And then if you're doing it just for that, you're about to hit a serious valley in your walk with the Lord, okay? You're about to be depressed in about a day and a half and counting. Because it's not about weight loss, and it's not for that. That's not why we do it. It is not a crash diet. The third thing that it is not, and this is so important, fasting is not us manipulating God into doing what we want. Fasting is not centered around my demands being met. Sometimes it's easy to get into a mindset where you're like, okay, so I'm paying the cost, right? Like I'm the one not eating for 5 days so that God does what I need him to do. There's a difference between fasting and praying for a breakthrough or trying to manipulate or twist God's arm into doing what you see fit. And fasting is not about manipulating God. It's not about your demands being met. Again, if you're going into it with the mindset of, this is going to be awesome, all I got to do is not eat for 5 days, and after 5 days, I'm going to get that relationship, or I'm going to see that breakthrough, or this thing is going to happen exactly how I need to see it happen because I just didn't eat for 5 days, God. Again, you're about to hit a really steep valley because fasting is not about your demands being met. Now, let's talk about what fasting is really quick, okay? The opposite of all of these things. So, fasting is not required, but fasting is an invitation. Fasting is an invitation for you to show God, I'm willing to neglect my physical need to show my spiritual need, my desire for more of you, my desire for you to show up in this situation. Now, even though it's not required in the Bible, you see fasting throughout the Bible, Old and New Testament. And you see a ton of different circumstances. You see a ton of different stories where people put this to work, where people understood this is how I fight. As someone who believes in God as a person of faith, this is how I do battle. This is how I get the God of all creation on working with me and aligning myself with him. This is how I do that. So you see different stories where people would fast and pray for protection. You see situations where they were fasting and praying for provision, where they needed God to provide for them. You see different times where they're doing it for breakthrough in a certain situation. You see times where they're doing it literally for freedom. You see times where they're just doing it for intimacy. A lot of times in the New Testament, after Jesus has come, you see the early church fasting and praying because they were like, we're just that desperate for more intimacy with God. We just love Jesus that much. We just want communion with Jesus so much that let's fast and pray. Let's turn away from a physical need and just show God how much we desire to be closer to him. So even though fasting is not required, it's an invitation to show with your body how much you love God and how much you need God. Second thing, it's a physical discipline showing a spiritual need. You might be like, you said that already, but I want to hit home a different point. It's a physical discipline showing a spiritual need with the focus being on the spiritual need. Okay, so I want to make this really clear. Fasting has a lot more to do with what you're seeking than what you're giving up. It's not a competition. You're like, of course. Okay. Let's be real for a second. What happens is you're getting ready to do this, and you're like, oh, you're going to do the week of prayer? Yeah, I'm doing it. Oh, cool. What are you doing? You're like, oh, I felt like God told me to do 2 days. Oh, that's awesome. That's so cool. What are you doing? Oh, I'm actually doing 3. Oh, okay. Yeah, I might do 3 too. I'm just waiting to see if God, what God says to me. We didn't finish the conversation. We just left off. I shared this on Sunday. So I grew up in a Christian home, thankfully, and so fasting is something that I've always seen and I understood. So I've done it a ton of times throughout my walk, and it's been amazing. And I know that there's breakthrough that has come. There's direction, there's wisdom, there's clarity that has come through seasons where I've done this. And I'm going to talk in a second about some different types of fast, but for me, the one that I've typically just always done has been a liquid fast. So I'm just not eating any solid foods, but I'm doing liquid. So I'll do Gatorade, and I would do like juices and stuff like that. And it's hard. It's difficult. And so typically I would do that for a week. And like 10 years ago, it was shortly after I got married. And, my wife and I, there was something that we were praying for. And so I was like, I feel like God put it on my heart to fast and pray. That's when you know it's God, because I don't ever wake up and be like, I don't want to eat. So I was like, I'm going to fast and pray. And I was with a buddy and who's a little older than me. And, we were talking. He said, oh, man, that's so cool. He said, what are you doing, just water? And I said, huh? And he said, are you just doing water? I said, oh, no, I'm just doing liquids, but I'm sure it's like the same thing. It's all drink. He goes, yeah, no, it's not the same thing. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, oh, when I do it, I just do water. And he wasn't trying to be a jerk about it. Maybe he was. I don't know. But I was like, oh, that's cool. No, I do liquids. And I just felt like less of a person, like less spiritual in a moment, because I was made aware that my buddy does just water. And so I was literally like, it stuck with me the whole rest of the day. I'm like, there's no way. It's liquid. It's the same thing. Like, there's no. And so I got home. I was like, hey, Faith, man, God spoke to me. I think I'm just going to do water, I'm going to step it up a notch. So she was like, okay. And so I didn't even try to lead into it. I just, we're just going to do water starting now. And so this was literally the most miserable week of my life. It was terrible. And it literally became so much more about what I was giving up than what I was seeking. And so, even funny things like because I had never done before like that, never done research, I didn't realize that like you get a buildup of stomach acid if you're literally ingesting nothing but water. And there's things that you can do to counteract that, but because I just did it on a whim, I literally felt like a fire-breathing dragon starting day 2. I would dread burps because it would bring tears to my eyes because I was like literally burping up stomach acid. It got so bad, I was convinced by like day 4 I was dying. I was like, but I was like, I will make it 7 days. I will get closer to God. So like literally day 4, 5, and 6, I didn't get off the couch. I was literally on the couch like a little baby sipping ice water. And I had such a rotten attitude. I was so short-tempered. I was not reading my Bible. I was not praying at all. That was the last thing I wanted to do. In my mind, I was like, I will make it 7 days with just the water. And it was so funny. My wife just says what it is. I remember on day 6, she goes, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? You're like the most ungodly person right now. Like, I don't understand. And I was just like, you're right. Like, what am I doing? I started off with the right intention, but I so quickly made it about what I was giving up as opposed to what I was seeking. It just became this thing that for me was more about my willpower than my need for God. And so I want to encourage you, if you decide that you want to do this, it is a physical discipline showing a spiritual need, centered around this spiritual need of, God, I need you. So that's where my focus is going to be. So God could call you to do what you do. God could call you to do what you do. I want to seek God and ask God to tell me what he wants me to do, and I'll be content with that because I'm not competing with you, and I'm not competing with you. What I'm doing is I'm pursuing God, and I'm pursuing breakthrough, and I'm pursuing intimacy, and so that's what I'm going to focus on. This last thing that I want to point out of what fasting is fasting is centered around God's will. So it's not us manipulating God into doing what we want, and it's not my demands being met, but what it is me trying to align myself and my will with who God is. So you may be going into it thinking, I really hope that God does it this way and does the thing that I want him to do, but hopefully you end the week saying, but God, I want what you want for my life. And even if I think I know how it should work out, even if I think I know what breakthrough should look like, even if I think I have the timeline down perfect, God, I want your timing, and I want your way, and I want this situation to happen the way that you want it to. Denying my physical need, pursuing my spiritual need should result in my will aligning with God's, not hoping that God's will aligns with mine. So fasting is centered around the will of God. Now, I want to give you just a few quick guidelines, really practical guidelines if this is something that you do decide to do with us next week. And if you don't, again, this series is so much bigger than just this 5 days for our church. This series is meant to equip you for a lifetime, to say, man, when I need breakthrough, when my back is up against the wall, or when I get to the point where I need breakthrough because I need more of God, that you know where to turn and you know how to do this. So I want to give you a few practical guidelines for fasting. First thing is this. There's a difference between fasting and abstaining. Now, it's going to sound like I'm splitting hairs right here, and this is not a huge deal, but I want to teach you the right way, and I'm guilty of this too. So many times in church lingo, you can say like, I'm going to fast social media, or I'm going to fast Netflix, or I'm going to fast TV, I'm going to fast the computer, I'm going to fast whatever else. So fasting by definition is going without food and water. So going without social media is not fasting. That's abstaining. And that is a good thing. That's a really good thing. That's a really healthy thing to do. It's amazing to say, you know what? I can put this thing to the side and I can go without this thing. That's amazing, and that's a discipline that we should all do on a regular basis, but that's not fasting. So fasting by definition is going through a period where you physically are denying yourself food or liquid, okay? Does that make sense? So second thing is this. You should be praying about the type and length of fast that you do. Now, when you pray, you don't pray at the expense of wisdom. They go hand in hand, okay? So there are so many different types of fasting, and you can do some research on your own. There are literally people that God has put it on their heart to do like this absolute fast where they go with no food or water. And they can only do that for a very short amount of time because your body can shut down, but God has given them a grace to do that, and they felt specifically like God asked them to do that, so that they did that. I have never done that. I don't know if I ever will do that. If I ever consider that, it will need to be because God told me to do that. But that's one type. Then you have a type of fasting where it's just water, which is awesome, and a lot of people do that. If you're going to do that, from experience, I would say do your research, and there are things that you can do to help with the fire-breathing stuff, and that's awesome. There are also just liquid fasts where you just say, I'm not going to eat any food and I'm just going to do liquid. So I'll do Gatorade, or I'll do juices, or I'll do soups. I'll do anything like that, but I'm not going to do any solid food. There are also times where people will fast meals or times during the day. And so a lot of times, if you work a physically demanding job, you may not be able to go days without food. Okay? And God's not up there being like, this guy just did water and you just did breakfast. Okay? Again, it's not about that. It's about you saying, God, I need you, and God, I'm willing to show how desperate I am for you. And so some people will fast times of the day. Some people will fast meals. Other people will fast food groups. You see this, the ultimate example is Daniel. A lot of people hear this Daniel fast. Daniel literally decided that God had told him that he should just eat fruits and vegetables. And so that's all he did. He fasted everything else, every other food group. And so you can fast different food groups. So there are so many different things that you can do, as well as different durations. There are examples in the Bible of people fasting meals, people fasting days, 3 days, 7 days, 14, 21, 40. There are even examples of when you don't see the end. It's like this indefinite thing, and who knows when they ended. Okay, so there is everything in between. And again, this is not a religious act where it needs to be bot to equal this. It's no. Let me ask God. Let me seek God and say, God, what are you calling me to do? What do you want me to do? And I'll do it. And so before you make a flippant decision, before your decision is based on the things that you've heard other people decide, I want to encourage you, before you even fast and pray, to pray about what you're going to fast and pray about. To pray about what you're going to fast and how long you're going to do it. Third thing is this. If you're not seeking God more, you're just starving yourself. Okay? Practically speaking. If you're not going to up your time with God, you're just going to have a miserable week. Okay? So while you're getting ready to do this fast, build into your schedule, hey, maybe I spend 30 minutes with God. I'm going to make it so I can spend an hour with God this week. Or maybe it's like, hey, obviously I'm not going to be eating lunch with everybody, so that time that normally I'd be eating lunch with everyone, I'm going to get in the car and I'm going to listen to worship music and I'm going to drive around where everybody else is eating. Okay? So the idea is that you're seeking God more. So don't do this for physical discipline and then don't up your time with God. You're just going to have a miserable week. And the fourth thing is, I'm just going to tell you right now, this is really hard. This is difficult. Okay, a lot of times you may picture yourself like floating around on a cloud because you're giving up food and that's so hard and you're like, I'm doing this so that I'm closer to God. There's a good chance you might not feel closer to God at all during the week. There may be a good chance that you just are fighting the urge to be ornery and in a terrible mood and attitude all week. That's typically what happens to me. I get hangry after one meal. It's unreal. And I got to fight the urge to be short with my wife. I got to fight the urge to be short with my kids. I got to fight the urge to just have a bad attitude. It's difficult. It is really difficult. The reason it's hard for a reason, right? You're literally denying these physical needs to show God how desperate you are. So don't let it catch you off guard if the week doesn't just be magical. Okay, hopefully it is for you. If it is, you suck because it's not for me, but I'll be happy for you. It's difficult. And the beauty of it is if you've never done it, we encourage people to pray about doing it with our church because you're doing it with a community who's going to be experiencing the same things that you are. And so it's amazing when you know some friends or some people that are doing it that you could text each other like, hey, how you doing? Good. All right, awesome. You're doing great. Keep going. You know, that you can be encouragement to each other, and we can do this together. Now, the beauty of doing this as a church is that we are not just fasting and praying for our church. We're praying for breakthrough in our community, in our campus, in the other campus, in our church as a whole. But we're also fasting and praying not just for my individual needs, but I'm fasting and praying for your individual needs. That when we do this as a body, it's not just the things that I'm bringing to God. I'm praying for the things that you all are bringing to God. I'm praying that you experience intimacy in a new way. I'm praying that you experience breakthrough in your relationship or your marriage or your relationship with your kids or the thing that's happening at your workplace. That we're doing this together as a body for each other and for ourselves. And so again, if you have never done this, I encourage you to pray and see if God is leading you to do this next week. And if not, again, after this series, I hope that you feel equipped enough to have the tools in your pocket to say, hey, man, when things get tough or when I hit a wall and I need to break through and I need to go to the next level in God, that I know what I can do to push through. I know what I can do. I know how I can fight. So real quick, if you guys can give me a few more minutes, I want to show you a story in the Bible. One example that is one of my favorite examples of fasting and prayer and showing you how this king and this nation and this army, they knew how to fight. They knew how to do battle, and I think that it'll encourage you. I want to give you a few things through this that you can write down and you can put in your war chest that when you need to be reminded of what we can do, you got something to turn to. Is that cool? If you got your Bibles, you can turn to 2 Chronicles 20. If not, we're going to throw it up on the screen, and I'm going to read a pretty long story. I don't usually do this, but if you can just, all the ADD people, just bear with me, okay? We're going to get through this together. If you can just give me a few minutes of your attention. If you're going to get lost on the screen, just listen to my words. You can close your eyes if you need to. But this story is incredible. We're going to read through this real quick, and I'm going to point a few things out to you. So 2 Chronicles 20 says this. After this, the Moabites and Ammonites, and with them some of the Meunites, came against Jehoshaphat for battle. Some men came and told Jehoshaphat, a great multitude is coming against you from Edom, from beyond the sea, and behold, they are in En Gedi. Then Jehoshaphat was afraid and set his face to seek the Lord, and proclaimed a fast throughout all Judah. And Judah assembled to seek help from the Lord. From all the cities of Judah they came to seek the Lord. Now, you have this king getting word that 3 armies, 3 nations have come together with the common goal of wiping him, his family, and his nation out completely, of killing them completely. And so Jehoshaphat calls for not just himself, not just his leaders, not just his family, but for the entire nation to gather together and to fast and pray for God's help. To fast and pray for God's breakthrough. So if you read this whole thing, we're going to skip around a little bit, but if you read this whole thing, you see that every man, woman, and child, they had this common goal of fasting and praying for breakthrough in this insanely scary scenario that was upon them. And so Jehoshaphat, he gets everyone together, and he's praying to God on behalf of this whole nation. And he has an amazing prayer, but he concludes his prayer in verse 12, and he says this, "For we are powerless against this great horde that is coming against us. We do not know what to do, but our eyes are on you." What a profound prayer. God, I don't know what to do, but my eyes are on you. And so I've told you this before, but in the Old Testament, they didn't have the privilege of having this intimacy with God like you and I. This is before Jesus. And so back then, the word of the Lord would come through a priest or a prophet. So God sends a word to the king and the nation through a prophet. And in verse 15, you see this word. The prophet says, "Listen, all Judah and inhabitants of Jerusalem and King Jehoshaphat. Thus says the Lord to you, do not be afraid and do not be dismayed at this great horde, for the battle is not yours, but God's. Tomorrow go down against them. Behold, they will come up by the ascent of Ziz. You will find them at the end of the valley, east of the wilderness of Jeruel. You will not need to fight in this battle. Stand firm, hold your position, and see the salvation of the Lord on your behalf. O Judah and Jerusalem, do not be afraid and do not be dismayed. Tomorrow go out against them, and the Lord will be with you." Then Jehoshaphat bowed his head with his face to the ground, and all Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, they fell down before the Lord, worshiping the Lord. And the Levites and the Kohathites and the Korathites, they stood up to praise the Lord, the God of Israel, with a loud voice. They rose early in the morning, and they went out into the wilderness of Tekoa. And when they went out, Jehoshaphat, he stood up and he said, "Hear me, Judah and inhabitants of Jerusalem. Believe in the Lord your God, and you will be established. Believe his prophets, and you will succeed." And when he had taken counsel with the people, he appointed those who were to sing to the Lord and praise him in holy attire as they went before the army. And they sang, "Give thanks to the Lord, for his steadfast love endures forever." When they began to sing and praise, the Lord set an ambush against the men of Ammon, Moab, and Mount Seir, who came against Judah, so that they were routed. For the men of Ammon and Moab, they rose against the inhabitants of Mount Seir, devoting them to destruction. And when they had made an end of the inhabitants of Seir, they all helped to destroy one another. When Judah came to the watchtower of the wilderness, they looked toward the horde, and behold, there were dead bodies lying on the ground. None had escaped. When Jehoshaphat and his people came to take their spoil, they found among them in great numbers goods, clothing, and precious things, which they took for themselves until they could carry no more. There were 3 days in taking the spoil. It was so much. On the 4th day, they assembled in the valley of Barak, for there they blessed the Lord. Therefore, the name of that place has been called the Valley of Barak to this day. So, as they know how to fight this battle, when adversity hits, when literally worst case scenario is knocking at their door, they know what to do. This people group, they fast and they pray and they do a few things that we're about to talk about. And what God does is God literally sets confusion in the camp of the enemy, and the enemy begins to turn on itself, and the enemy ends up killing itself. How amazing, how incredible that the thing coming against them, the thing that was threatening them, that wanted to kill them, that wanted to destroy them, to wipe them out, was wiped out by God. That when God said, "The battle is not yours, the battle is mine. You don't have to fight, I'm going to fight for you," that they were able to take him at his word, and God fought the battle for them. I want to give you a few things that you can write down, that you can hold on to, that when you are facing something, that you can remind yourself of, to say, "This is how I fight." First thing is this: when the battle comes, you can seek the fight or you can seek God. When the battle comes, you can seek the fight or you can seek God. You ever feel like a great multitude has risen up against you? I mean, not to be dramatic, but you ever have those days, have those weeks, have those months where you're like, literally anything else could go wrong right now? Anything. Honestly, anything. Like, I'm getting attacked from all sides. I'm getting hit from places I shouldn't be getting hit from, or I never saw it coming. I didn't plan for this. I didn't prepare for this. Like, okay, God, I'm willing to walk through some little stuff, but this is huge. Like, this is life and death. This is too big. I can't do this. I can't bear this. Have you ever felt like you've been getting attacked from a huge multitude? I love how this points out this simple fact that it says that Jehoshaphat was afraid. We're not talking about Mr. Incredible here. We're not talking about a spiritual superhero here who didn't feel what you and I feel. Literally, the word comes to this king, and I can imagine he's afraid for himself. He's afraid for his family. He's afraid for this nation that he's governing. I mean, what would you feel like if word came to you that not just one nation was coming against you, not just two nations were coming against you, no, 3 different nations have now combined forces to come and to wipe you off the map? He was afraid. He was scared. But check out how profound, how simple, but how profound, how simple but hard this must have been. It literally says that he was afraid, so he sought the Lord. He had to make a decision in the moment. The easy thing is when stuff comes at me, when stuff attacks me, when stuff happens, that I'm looking at it and I'm concerned, I'm consumed, I'm overwhelmed. I don't understand how I'm going to do this. I'm trying to figure it out. I'm trying to figure the loophole and figure out how I could get around this or I could maneuver it. That's what comes easy. But he, in the midst of being afraid for his life, he makes this decision, this profound decision to say, I'm scared out of my mind, but let me seek God. It sounds so simple. It sounds too simple, but the reality is that when you find yourself in it, it's the hardest thing that you can do. And too many times we could go to God in prayer and we could just be looking at the problem. We could just be looking at the enemy so much that my prayer life and my prayer time is just consumed with me looking at what I'm facing. And when I leave in prayer, I don't feel any better. I don't feel any more encouraged. I don't feel any more strength. I just feel more aware of what I'm facing. He wasn't ignoring the fact. He wasn't oblivious to what was going on. He was scared out of his mind, but he made the decision to say, but God, I trust you. God, I don't know what to do. I love that he says that he admits it, the king. You should have all the answers. I mean, you're leading God's people. You should know what to do. The king in his prayer in front of all of the people, in front of God's people, literally has the humility and the honesty to say, God, I don't know what to do, but my eyes are on you. God, I don't see a way out. God, we are so outnumbered. We can't compete with this. We don't have weapons like that. We don't have the manpower that they have. God, they're coming at us from all sides. I'm afraid. God, I'm confused. I don't know what to do. But God, I'm going to seek you. I'm going to make the decision right now that whatever comes against me, whatever tries to attack me, and whatever tries to captivate my attention, I'll make the decision that, yeah, that's happening, but God, I'm going to seek you first and foremost. That, God, I'm not going to seek the fight. I'm going to seek you. See, what comes natural to me is I'm like, all right, let's put the gloves on. Let's go to work. Come on. I got to figure this out. I got to work this out. I got to somehow try to figure out what we're going to do. I got to somehow get us out of this. That's what comes natural as a guy. I just want to fix it. I just want to work it out. But I think it would go so much further if my first response as a man of faith and as a child of God is not to say, let me fight it, but let me say, God, I want to seek you, and you tell me what to do. You show me what to do. You show me where to go. You give me your timing. This king is seeking God for breakthrough. Seeking God for breakthrough. Now, I want to say something else that's going to sound really simple, and you might miss it, so we might have to say it twice. But breakthrough typically comes for people who seek it. Breakthrough typically comes for people who seek it. And there are way too many people that you just accept something as part of your story. That you just accept something as your new normal. Your new reality. And I think we would get so much further, and I think we'd be so much more free, and I think that we would live so much more of the life that God intended if that when things came against me, I didn't just decide because all I'm looking at is the problem. Oh, can't compete. I'm just going to surrender and wave the white flag, and I'll just live with this. But when you seek God, that you start to have this faith rise up and say, nope, this won't be part of my story. This is not what God has for my marriage. This is not what God has for my kids. This is not how my life is going to pan out. So, God, I don't know what to do, and I don't know how you could do it, but I'm going to seek you, and I'm going to ask for breakthrough. I'm going to ask that you go before me and that you work it out. See, Jehoshaphat, instead of taking the posture of a combatant in this war, he just took the posture of a prayerful spectator to say, God, you lead. I'm not going to seek the fight. I'm going to seek you. You lead. The next time something comes against you, because you have the faith to say, hey, before I go try to fight, let me be a prayerful spectator. Let me seek God, and I'll be obedient to what he says and what he's asking me to do. When the battle comes, you can either seek the fight or you can seek God. The second thing you can write down is this. Praise triggers the battle that you can't see. Praise triggers the battle that you can't see. We see in verse 22, it says that when they began to sing and praise, the Lord set an ambush. Isn't it funny that the ambush didn't start when the prophet started saying what the word of the Lord was, and it didn't start in the middle of the fast or on day 5 of the fast or whatever day it would have been completed for them. But it says that when they began to sing, that the Lord set an ambush. The reality is that your praise triggers a battle that you can't see. And I think it's so profound that, again, this breakthrough did not happen in the middle of the fast. So it probably would have been normal to be like, our lives are on the line and we're not eating. God, what's up? I have a bad attitude just about not eating. I can't imagine if my life was on the line. But the breakthrough, the battle wasn't won in the middle of the fast. They got a word from the Lord in the middle of the fast, which is amazing. But again, now they make a decision, just like they made a decision to seek God, they make a decision to stand on the word of the Lord. Even though the battle was not won yet, they made the decision to say, okay, but God, if you promise it, and God, if you say it, then I can take it to the bank, and I can build my life on that. And so I will have the ability to push myself to praise because you said that you would do it. It takes faith to praise before the victory. Anybody can be in church being like, thank you, Jesus, when everything worked out. But it takes faith that when you're in the middle of it, when you still don't see the end in sight, when nothing has seemed to work out yet, that you can be like, but God, I'll sing about your love, and I'm going to sing about your faithfulness, and I'll continue to sing about your goodness. Even though I feel like there's nothing good going on right now, you're still good. And God, I know you love me, and I know that you love my family. And so my praise isn't going to be contingent on my circumstance or my situation. I'm going to praise you for who you are, and I'm going to praise you for what you said. I love that they get this word from the Lord, but even with the prophet saying, this is not your battle, this is not your fight, this is the fight, this is God's fight, this is his battle, there still was this element where he said, so tomorrow morning, you need to wake up, and you need to go to the battle lines. I mean, they weren't like just off the hook at this point. They still were given instruction of what to do, and it still took faith for them to not run, to not retreat, to not go wave the white flag when they were clearly outnumbered, outmanned, and outgunned. But the prophet said, you need to wake up in the morning, and you need to go towards the battle. Go towards the battle line. And how amazing this leader, this King Jehoshaphat, that he gets up and he reminds the people. He stirs it up in the people. Man, you stick to the word of the Lord. You stick to what the prophet said. We're going to believe it. We're going to stand on it. And what he does is so incredible. We've talked about this these last couple of weeks, but what he does is he doesn't say, hey, tallest dudes in the front. Whoever's the best at swinging a sword in the front. The guy with the best bow shot in the front. What he says is, hey, get all the worshipers, all the people, the whole worship team, the whole praise band, and you guys be in front, and you guys lead us out to the battle. And we are going to sing the whole way. We're going to sing with every step about the goodness and the faithfulness of God. He wasn't worried about putting warriors up front. He put worshipers up front. Because I think there was an element that he understood that praise will trigger a battle that you can't see. If we can get to the point where we can just let go and we can let God, God will become a problem for your problems. If I can stop being so consumed by what I'm facing and I can seek God. if I cannot seek me trying to work it out on my own, but I can seek God. And I can take to the bank the word of the Lord for my life and for my family and the promises of God for me and say, it's not just true, but it's also for me. And I can count on that and I can just let go. Then God will become a problem for my problems. Praise triggers a battle that you can't see. And this last thing is this. God can take the thing sent to break you and use it to bless you. When you fight your battle the right way, when you use what you're equipped to use as a son and a daughter of God, God can take the thing that was sent to break you and he can use it to bless you. Because you just imagine for a second everything that's going on inside of these people. Getting word that we are about to get wiped out, that everyone has ganged up against us and they're coming for us, they're pursuing us to kill us. Could you imagine the emotion, not just fear for your life, but realizing your wife is about to be slaughtered, your kids are about to be slaughtered, that your whole genealogy and lineage is about to be wiped from the face of the planet, that everyone that you love and you care about is about to be killed, and there's nothing you can do about it. They're coming after you at the moment. You got nothing. And you deciding to say, all right, well, let's see God, and I'm going to fast, and I'm going to pray, and you start to do that, and then you get this word from this prophet of God saying, this fight is not yours, but it's mine, and you trust in me. And then saying, I want you to get up the next morning, I want you to pursue the battle, I want you to go towards the battle, but I want you to trust in me. And you waking up the next morning, and this king saying, reminding you of the word of the Lord, and then your king saying, you know what, I don't even want the warriors up front, I want the worshipers up front, and what is going to lead us and what is going to guide us into battle is the praise of the faithfulness and the goodness of God, and you singing the whole way that you're marching towards this battle with fear gripping your heart, not knowing if you're ever going to make it back home, and not knowing if your family's going to be wiped out. But the whole time, you're just singing, God, I trust you. God, I believe in you. God, I have faith, and I know that you're good, and I know that you're doing something in my life. And every step that you take, you're getting closer. And could you imagine getting to the edge of that mountain and looking down into the valley, and the thing that was sent to kill you, to destroy you, to break you, is now laying dead at your feet, that not one of them escaped? Could you imagine what went on inside of them? Could you imagine the faith that rose up inside of them in that moment? That God, man, when you said it wasn't mine, it was yours, you weren't kidding, man. They're all dead. And then could you imagine the realization of he didn't just wipe out the army that came to destroy us, but there is literally food, there is clothing, there is weapons, there are all these earthly things that we need. And now God is saying, hey, go get the spoils. And it was so much, it took 3 days for them to collect everything. You know, this valley is called the Valley of Barak. Barak literally translates to blessing. So the very valley that they were pursuing for battle, God turned it into a valley full of blessing. If you can let go and you can let God, if you can trust in God, if you can seek God, if you can fight your battle the right way, God can literally take the thing that has an assignment on your marriage and on your relationships and on your kids and at your workplace and on your finances, and he can use that thing to grow you, to mature you, to provide for you, to bless you, to create in you the man or the woman that you were called to be, to bring purpose from every painful situation that you could ever experience. I want to call the band up as I wrap this up. You know, as I was doing this message and writing this last point out, I couldn't help but think about a time in my life where we experienced this firsthand. Some of you know my story, but I was born in Michigan, and when I was young, 7 years old, my parents, they had great jobs. We owned a home on a beautiful piece of property. Life was going pretty well. They felt like God asked them to just sell everything and to move to Hackensack, New Jersey from Michigan, which is polar opposites, and to start a church in the inner city. And so my parents just stepped out in faith and said, whoa, this does not make sense. Everybody in their life was like, what are you doing? This makes no sense. But they're like, we know that God said this, and so we're going to do it. And so they were faithful, and they did it. And they sold everything that they had. And we left, again, this home and this gorgeous piece of property to move into this small apartment in the inner city of Hackensack. And my dad was in full-time ministry, and he gave that up to working 2 or 3 secular jobs to be able to do ministry on the side, to plant this church. And When my dad was in there signing the lease when we first moved, the landlord, he was a really nice guy. He was a funny guy. And he said, hey, listen, if you're ever looking for side work, I have a snow plowing business. And, if it ever snows, you can pick up some extra bucks. But it never snows out here, so don't get your hopes up. My dad was like, yeah, okay, thanks, but no thanks. And so, in the next few months, my dad was getting side jobs. He was doing plumbing and just doing whatever he could do to make money to provide for our family. But the cost of living is so expensive in the Northeast, especially if you're not used to it, moving from the Midwest. And we were struggling. And we went through a season of 7 years where we were as broke as you can be, to the point where there were so many times that I can think back on as a kid, and we didn't have food in the house. It wasn't like, oh, no, I don't want that, or I'm not in the mood for that, Mom. It was, we don't have food in the house. We don't have gas money for my parents to go to work to try to make money to do the things that we need to do. There was multiple holidays where the presents were super sparse. And early on, my dad was really struggling with God, because he was like, God, I know that you called me to do this, and I did what I thought you asked me to say, and it doesn't make any sense. How we're trying to be faithful, and we're trying to start this church on the side while we're trying to work multiple jobs, and we're not even making enough money to cover the bills and to buy food. And this was a really, really bad season for us right here, and we had nothing in the house, no food in the house, and my dad just kind of got into a dark place pretty quick, and just frustrated and feeling like God had literally just let him there and given up and abandoned us. And the side jobs that he was counting on to make money had dried up, and he was trying to get work, and it wasn't coming through. And he was just so depressed, and he was pumping gas, and somebody was like, hey, did you hear we're supposed to get snow this week? And he was like, oh, are you kidding me? Like, no. So he goes home and turns on the TV, and they were like, it's going to be record snowfall. My dad was like, great. We're literally going to be snowed in, and we have nothing to eat in the house. We're going to be stuck in this home. I'm not going to be able to go to the jobs that I do have, and so depressed. And he's sitting there, and he's like having it out with God. And as he's having it out with God, there's a knock at the door, and he opens the door, and it's the landlord. He's like, yo, you ready to go? My dad's like, what are you talking about? And the guy was like, remember snow plowing? Like, if you need work, we're going out right now. And so my dad was like, okay, sure. So he went and got stuff on, and he didn't ask, like, how much do you pay or anything like that. He was just like, it's work. So left a note for my mom, and he went out. And for those of you who are old enough to remember, this was the blizzard of 1996, which is like gone down in the record books for snowfall totals, like 4 feet of snow in parts of the country, in parts of the Northeast. And so my dad was literally out for 48 hours straight. 48 hours straight. Plowing snow, shoveling sidewalks, doing all this stuff. And at the end of all of that, he made enough money in those 48 hours to pay the bills and to come home with bags full of groceries. And so that blizzard may have been inconvenient for you. That blizzard was a blessing for us. And as my dad was sitting there moping and thinking about how God had left us and abandoned us, and he couldn't even provide for his family, meanwhile he's trying to lead other people to Jesus, God just works out this whole thing. We believe that blizzard was for us. That God took the thing that was about to push my dad over the edge, and he used it to bless our family and to provide for our family. When things come at you in life, you're not at the mercy of life anymore. In this world, Jesus is so straight up about it. You're going to have some trouble. It's part of the deal. You're going to have trouble. But take heart, because I've overcome it all. Nothing is catching me off guard. Nothing's catching me by surprise. Nothing could overwhelm me or overpower me. The same spirit that raised me back to life, it lives inside of you. You just need to understand you fight different now. You approach things different now. You battle different now. I want to ask you, could you stand up as we start to transition back into a time of worship really quick? You know, you see this model, so simple from this army. When facing adversity, when the enemy comes, they pray and they fast for God's help. They trust his word, and then they just praise him in advance. They pray and fast, they trust him at his word, and they praise in advance.